Dion and thanks for joining me. In this little tutorial I'm just going to show you how to do rocks, the natural surfaces of rocks, using just watercolor and pen in your sketchbook. It's a lovely way to capture some of the landscapes around you, and it's a very simple process for effective rocks. So let's get started. What I'm going to be using is the new Zeta series sketchbook by Stillman & Byrne. This is my sketchbook, my favourite sketchbook. It's pretty much the only one I'm using. The Zeta is just a brand new release. I have used their Epsilons and their Betas and their beautiful sketchbooks. The Zeta has a very thick, heavyweight, smooth white surface, and it's beautiful for mixed media and also for art journaling. And not to mention, that's my art on the cover of the 5.5 by 8.5 inch sketchbook, the hardbound sketchbook, which I love. So what I've done is I've actually cut a piece of paper out of it, which is a little easier for you to see. I'm also going to be using just basic watercolors, and one of the ones I tend to favour is the Koi Pocket Field Sketchbook by Sakura. Beautiful little box of watercolour. It's pretty messy at the moment. Great for travel and great for outdoor sketching. Love it. Use it a lot just playing around in my sketchbook. So they're the ones I'm going to be using. I'm also going to be using the Rapidograph by Koh-i-Noor. It's their technical pen. Very, very fine, as you can see, point. They come in a whole range of sizes, and I favour the very fine ones. This one's actually a 0 or a 0.35 nib. You can get them even smaller than that. I'm also going to show you their Nexus range, and these are standard 0.5 nibs, but they come in a whole bunch of colours, and they're really affordable. That's their Nexus pens by Koh-i-Noor as well. Love it. For my outline sketching, I favour the outliner pencil, and this comes in the Dior Inktense watercolour pencil box. I think you can buy them separately too, and the reason I love the outliner, it's just a grey lead pencil, just like anything else, lovely and soft, but the lead itself is actually totally non-water soluble. Most graphite pencils that you use when sketching are actually water soluble, so they can muddy your colours fairly easily. This particular one by Dior, it's their outliner, is entirely resistant, so you get a very clean, sharp line, and it doesn't dilute with water. Okay, so a very basic principle. We're just going to start by just outlining some basic rock shapes. Very basic. Can overlap some of them. Let's do one in the background, a couple of little ones in the front. Now remember that rocks can actually be any colour you want. That's pretty hard for you to see. Let's have a look there. Can you see that? There's the basic outline of the rock. We're going to start with just a really simple light wash of colour. I wonder if I could get you any closer. There you go. Let's have a look at that. I'm just going to start with a very soft, watered down base. Just brown. I'm just going to push it around the water. And lovely soft wash. Just let the colour pool. That actually adds to the texture of the rock. Really lovely. For this one I'm just going to mix a little bit of a softer brown, a little pinker. Don't worry if the colours blend together. Just outline your rocks. Actually adds. I'm also going to just do mix a little bit of blue with brown it gives you a slightly green tint, but rocks don't always have to be brown. Rock surfaces, as we all know, can come in loads of different colours, and the actual light that reflects in and around rocks can affect the colours. They reflect them beautifully. Let's just go for something a little more wood toned here. There's just a first layer of colour. That's the first way to capture it. So now I'm just going to let that dry, and then we'll come back and do some more. Okay, so that's dry, and don't worry about the pooling of colour. That just adds to the rock personality, which is really kind of fun, especially when you're sketching on the go. Now for our next layer, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to just layer some darker shadow mixtures. Just blend a few colours, making them a little bit darker. So using some of the same values, I'm actually going to start mixing them together. And I'm just going to paint in areas very lightly of some shadow. Just giving it a little bit of dimension in and behind the other rocks. And I'm going to do this with several different colours. So we're using the red tone now, and I'm just going to give that a little bit of colour there. Just giving it some shape. And then our blue tone, giving that some shape and dimension as well. Oops. And then just a few little ones. We're not going to overwork it, just a little bit of colour. Darker tones, and it's just adding a little bit of dimension. So we're going to do that again. I'm just going to let that one dry, and then we'll put some more colour on. That's dry. So now I'm just going to take a smaller round brush, and I'm just going to add an even darker, just a few little darker spots to add a little bit more dimension to areas of our rock. Just think about where the shadow is. So I'm, adding a little bit of dark colour towards the bottom, behind the other rock. So we're just defining that shadow from that other rock. There's some grooves in my rock there. Let's just bring a little bit up here. And the same sort of thing here. So we're just leaving a little bit of an edge there to separate the two rocks, which I'll work with in pen in a minute. And I'm just going to, again, working with the shadows underneath, a little bit up here, just to give it a little bit of definition, just going around. And then with the blue rock in the background, I'm just going to add a tiny bit of blue and a tiny bit of grey. I'm using a dark grey, almost a Payne's grey, for this one because the rock itself is sitting further back. It's a darker colour overall. So we just need to make the shadows a little bit more defined. underneath there, where the rock's actually sitting. A few little shapes in the rock. Don't overwork these second layers. It's with sketchbook work, often it's very quick. You're just trying to capture the essence of something. Just get a sense of it, and you don't have to overwork it for too much detail. And as I said, rocks can be any colours. There are all sorts of colours. But you know, the key to getting the dimension and all the different shadows and tone and texture in a rock is to layer. And you know, when you're working in a sketchbook, I don't generally do more than perhaps 3 layers like I've done here. Now I'm going to let this dry, and then we're going to put some pen on it. Okay, so that's dry. Now I'm going to take my Rapidograph, the Koh-i-Noor. This is a technical pen, as I said, but you'll find that a lot of sketchbook artists like to use them. They're not the cheapest on the market, and they do take maintenance. You have to make sure you're cleaning the nibs, but they have the most exquisite, fine tips and deliver a beautiful flow, very even flow of ink. I love them and use them all the time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to very lightly, and not entirely, but I'm just going to loosely outline my rock. I'm going to keep my lines simple, and I'm not going to let them be too straight. They're going to be broken as I work my way around the rock. And I'm just going to move the lines in a little bit for some definition here. Not all the way around, just a few areas, mostly in the shadow areas. Mostly underneath, but just loosely show me the impression of the rock, just like that. And now we're going to add some texture to the rock, and I'm going to start that with just what we call cross-hatching, which is, you know, pretty basic, just little, to help define the shadows, little lines in various places, straight lines around, small little lines. Can you see that? There we go. See how tiny those lines are? You're just going to work those in the shadow areas, helping you just define the form a little bit. And then you can go back over it in the opposite direction in some places to give it a little bit more depth. Darken them with some more cross-hatching. Don't forget those shadow areas. We're really starting to get a sense of this rock now. And if you want a darker definition, darker shadow, you simply make your lines closer together, more dense. And they'll come out a lot darker. Okay, so just vary the direction. Now just to show you something different on this sort of pinky brown rock, I'm going to use a tinted pen. This is the Koh-i-Noor Nexus. Fantastic pen, love it. Very cheap, very affordable. Comes in a whole range of different colours. Same thing. Okay, I'm using a brown and I'm cross-hatching over my rocks. And what that's doing is there's a lot of harmony with the tinted inks. Can you see that? Get it into focus. There it is. Okay, so we're catching the natural surface, pardon me, of the rocks. Okay, and you can just keep working on your cross-hatching until you're really happy that you've got it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little bit of a shadow underneath the rocks. So I'm kind of going to use similar colours, but I'm going to tone them down a little bit with some grey, Payne's grey. And I'm just going to push a tiny little wash of colour in and around these rocks. And what I'm doing there is creating a tiny little bit of shadow. So I'm just going to get clear water now. And I'm just going to let it blend out naturally. Just let the water blend out. Now I used a water-soluble ink in my pen, which is great because what's going to happen is if I touch the lines, it's going to pull a little bit of the ink out and help define the shadow. I do that quite a lot, particularly in my sketchbook. Saves a lot of time defining shadows using water-soluble ink. Okay, now I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to show you one last step to create a little bit more texture. So just before I move on to the final step, I'm just going to put, using a Payne's grey, I'm just going to put a final little very sort of simple line of shadow, another dimension of shadow, just directly under those rocks. Just to intensify it a little bit. I rarely use black in paint, usually just to tone down, because I find it very extreme and it breaks up the harmony of colour. So I often use a Payne's grey, which is, you know, very, very dark grey, and you'll find that that actually draws in the colours around it. Okay, so for our final step, we're just going to, I want to create a little bit more texture on here. And one of the things I'm going to do is use a watercolour pencil. Now this one is, which one's this? This is the Albert Dürer by Faber-Castell. Really lovely. And I'm using the dark brown, which is, it's actually Venetian red. And I'm going to use a tiny bit of black as well here. So I'm just going to get my brush, and I start by just soaking the tip with water. Soaking the tip of the watercolour pencil so the pencil will actually melt. And then I'm just going to splatter very lightly, very gently, just a little bit of splatter. Tiny little bit of splatter around here on the rocks. But mostly on the dirt. Doesn't matter where it goes, it's all part of the effect. Tiny little bit of black, same sort of thing, but I'm going to use a lot less water on the black because I don't want to overdo the black splatter. All I'm doing is creating dimension with the black splatter, and I'm concentrating that around the shadow. You can see that, all that black splatter in and under the shadow. Now because I need to create some balance and harmony, I've used blue over here. I'm going to actually bring that out, and I'm going to use what colour will I use? I'm going to use a blue-grey. This is a blue-grey. This is a Derwent as well, but this is just their regular watercolour, and they're not as good, I don't think, as the Albert Dürer, and they're not as expensive. But, you know, they're okay. You'll just not get quite the liquidity of colour. So just splatter a tiny little bit of blue, or blue-grey, and that will create some harmony. And bring the blue to the opposite end of the painting. And there you go. And there is a very simple and effective technique for creating natural surfaces, and there's some rocks. And as you can see, the Zeta paper held up beautifully. So I'm Dion Dior, and this is the Sketchbook Challenge, and thank you so much for joining me.